Thank you very much for your introduction. Yes, I used to work with this area, with Prussia now. I believe it's in the past. Maybe one day I will return to this area. The organizers asked me to present a speech concerning this Christianization of Prussia, and at the beginning I was, that's an easy task, but then I realized that it's not exactly what I thought. Of course, we know about this area much, especially regarding the early missions of Adalbert of Prague, which is the very first saint of Slavonic areas, and he's popular in the whole of Europe, and that's one of the symbols of early Piast state. But then we know of crusades, of Prussia crusade, but it's usually treated as this 13th century crusade. I mean, the time when the Teutonic Order came or was invited to Prussia, but it's not exactly because the Prussian crusade started as early as in 11th century, and it was like organized by Polish princes. I don't know, every few single years. We know about some of them, but in general, some of them are hidden somewhere in the shadow. But it's not only about crusades, of course. The area I'm working with today is the part of Western Balt area, stretched between Vistula River, Neunas River to the east, Baltic Sea, and the Polish Mazovia to the south, and the boundaries of Prussia are quite well described in the 13th century sources, and also in Ulfstan's account in the end of 9th century, which is really interesting account, as you probably know. But what should be said about Prussia? I mean, in Poland, I think that everywhere, when we hear Prussia, we think that it's always the region between Vistula and Nemunas, but it's not really true. For the beginning of early Middle Ages, I mean 7th century and the beginning of 8th century, it looks like this. There is nothing like Prussia, and we have few cultural groups like Olsztyn group, Elbląg group, Dolgajkovo culture, and Sudoga culture. Every one of them is absolutely different. We have huge Germanic influences in Olsztyn and Elbląg group, but then somewhere in the 9th century probably something happened, but nobody really knows what happened that we have Prussia, which is stretched in this quite large area, but it's still, there is no something like a huge organization or something like that, and we can recall the information given by Wolfstan that Prussia, the land of Esti, because he calls them Esti, is very large. There are a lot of kings and a lot of towns or something like that, which suggests that there is no higher state of organization or something like that in this area. What I should say as an introduction to the subject of Christianization, some few words about the religious system. Scholars argue if we have polydoxia or if it's polytheism in this culture. The only one god that it's noted in medieval sources is Kurke. It's written in the Treaty of Christburg. Prussians promised they would not make offerings to an idol called Kurke, whose image they would create and venerate as a god every year after harvest, or to other gods who did not create heaven and earth irrespective of their names. But the other gods are mentioned as early in 1418, so it's like 15th century, and the whole pantheon of Prussia comes from 17th century, so it's not really reliable. That's why many scholars argue that Prussians were at the stage of polydoxia. We know that they worshipped or they made worships in sacred groves, and as the woods and groves were really central areas of many relations. Also, the one dedicated to the death of Adalbert. Interesting and important thing is that the only way to the afterwards for Prussian men was to be cremated. No exceptions, and it's also in Wolfstan relation, and it's in later 13th century accounts also. The Wolfstan gave us really interesting information about the whole process that consisted of few stages and took even few months. And the richer man was, the longer this feast and party could last. And after the feast, there was a horse race to pick up some of the goods that were left after the deceased, and then later the burning of the body and the burial itself. It should be stressed that some cremations were connected with horse skeleton burials. In general, it's for the first millennium, but we have many of such graves in Sambian Peninsula, which are like double layer. There is a horse on the bottom of the pit. The horse is not cremated, and there is a cremation burial on the top of the horse. That's typical Russian 11th, 12th century burial. The missions. Of course, when we think of the early missions, there is one by Adalbert of Prague, and the other one by Bruno of Querfurt, who followed Adalbert 12 years after his death, and in pretty much the same area. It's been studied in many ways. We can wonder why he was sent to Prussia, what was the goal, when he was, because archaeologists and historians don't agree if it was Sambia where the mission was addressed, or it was area of former Truso, I mean Elbląg. We don't really know. I think it was rather Sambia, because at this time Sambia was the central part not only of Prussia. I think that Sambia is something that we underestimate really. It's one of the pearls of the Baltic area, I think, but it's not really published, and it's not gonna be in the future. We know why. They have really great number of new discoveries. For example, the Viskiauten Emporium that's been searched for, I don't know, maybe few decades. It has been finally found, but we don't know about it in the Central and Eastern Europe, and it's not going to be published for some reason. So I think that it was Sambia. We all know that the mission of Adalbert was a failure. He died. We don't really know what was wrong, what went wrong with this mission. Some say that he was not so persuasive, that he couldn't encourage Prussians, that there is something interesting, that it's useful, and that the new vision of the world is somehow tricky for them. I think that they just didn't understand each other. I don't mean even the language. But the other thing is that probably he went somewhere that he shouldn't get in. I mean, the holy or the sacred grove. That's why he was killed. For him it was a failure, but for the one who sent him there, it was, I think, huge success, because it was one of the most important steps to make Piast state bigger. I mean, we got the Archbishop in Gniezno. Adalbert was a saint, first saint from the Slavic areas, and his cult was really spreading quite fast, not only in Slavonic areas. And so, as you can see, this is pretty much, I mean, probably not with this Pomerania area, but this is pretty much the state of Bolesław, the Braves, and Prussians area with this Samian, really rich and important place regarding the contacts, trade routes with Eastern Europe and Scandinavia. So we can only wonder if it was just a way to make position of Piast state stronger, and on this international scale, we are the one that are going to send a mission in the place, which is one of the last one with the pagans in Europe. So if it was just something that happened, maybe that was Adalbert just came to Poland and there was no tasks for him, so maybe they decided that he will go to the eastern north to convert pagans. Or maybe Bolesław the Brave had some greater ideas. Maybe he wanted to conquer all of this area. We will not know exactly. 12 years later, Bruno Querfurt came with his companions in pretty much the same area, but he moved eastern. He reached the Prussian-Latvian border, and he made a success because he baptized 300 Prussians with one of the chieftains called Netimer. But then we don't know where, why, and how exactly he was killed. Of course, some say that it was in the areas of today of modern Giżycko, and some others say that it was somewhere in Stara Łomża, stronghold. The cult of Bruno Querfurt is quite popular in this part of Poland nowadays. But after the death of Bruno, we don't know exactly what happened to the Netimer and his men. After that, the period of regular crusades to Prussia started, and most of Polish princes and kings invaded probably almost every year these areas. In the 12th century, it was even popular when a knight or someone couldn't go to the Holy Land. There was always alternative to go to the Prussian crusade. And of course, the pagan religion was a problem, and it was the main idea to convert Prussia, but it's probably not about only the religious. Even though we don't have much proofs of any Christian contacts or artifacts, we have only some proofs that the inhumation was somehow adopted as early as 11th, 12th century even, but probably it doesn't have much common with Christianity. Probably it's kind of fashion. Most of the graves are typical warrior graves. Some scholars believe that these traditions, inhumation traditions, could be inspired by Polish Pomerania, Mazovia, or some of Scandinavia, maybe, or even Kievan Rus. We don't really know exactly. And after these 200 years, when Prussia was really opposing these brutal invasions, there was a time where something changed. At the beginning of 12th and 13th century, let's say, the peaceful missions were started again, and this time the climate for that was really much better, and the Cistercian mission had really some great success. The famous Cistercian abbot Gottfried and his followers, especially Christian. He had really great success, baptized a lot of Prussians, especially in the western part of this area, just directly eastern to the Vistula River. There is one really interesting story that he baptized two of Prussian noblemen, and they went together with Christian to Rome, where they were baptized by Pope itself in 1215 or 1216, and Christian was nominated as the first bishop of Prussia this time. We know that they had some great success, that they built some churches, they had support from the local nobles, but but it wasn't really accepted by the rest of the tribe, of the indigenous Prussians. So there was, at least it's presented like this, that there was a need to give protection to the neophytes because they were somehow in danger from the side of the rest of Prussians. That's why Bishop organized the first order of Doctrine Brothers, but they failed. Right? They were not able to protect the neophytes, so that's why few years later, he accepted the proposition to invite Teutonic Knights to Prussia. And we know the rest of the story, that Prussia doesn't exist anymore. It took 50 years and two uprisings, two Prussian uprising, but there was no much place for discussion, and it was rather with the sword and fire. We know that there were some churches built. We know the places. Of course, we can put it on the maps, but no one found any of them. 10 years ago, when the Chronicle of Prussian Land by Peter of Duisburg was translated to Polish by Sławomir and Jarosław Wenta, everyone thought that it's a huge step, and now we can open the Chronicle, we can note the names of the place, and we can just go in the field and try to find the places. Not only this, but of course in different categories. But something like that didn't happen actually. We know the story of Christianization. We know that the churches are arising at new cemeteries with the inhumations, but it's not that easy. I mean, there are some inhumation cemeteries, but the burial rite is not really Christian. A lot of artifacts, a lot of amulets, a lot of weapons, and so on. It's not what church would expect, probably, and it's really interesting because this kind, like Równina Dolna cemeteries, are in use even in 16th century. And the other thing is that cremation was not raised. The cremation graves were still in use in 15th century. We know one great example from Stabławki. There was a burial. I mean, the mound. In the mound, the chest from the stone slabs, and inside there was a cremation grave with 3 vessels, 2 vessels of clay and one of glass, and in one of the vessels there were 30 coins of Michael Kuchmeister, the master of Orden, like 1414, 1422. so it's really it's only one of examples, and it's really well dated because of the numismatic evidence. We have many more examples of long duration of cremation graves, of this, let's say, pagan rituals on the cemeteries, but we have also huge number of accounts given by bishops from Zambia and the other areas that they clearly suggest that there was no Christianity among Russians even in 15th, 16th century, and just few sentences. The Bishop Michael Junge reveals that in the 15th century the local Russians still practiced the washing of baptism from children that were previously baptized by parish priests and gave them Russian names when they have received these names before. And in 1520, a public sacrifice of a black bull took place in Zambia with the permission of the Grand Master of Teutonic Order, Albert of Hohenzollern, towards approaching Gdańsk ships. And to give some resume, I think that the story of Christianization of Russia is really complicated, and we could say that they didn't get much, how to say, they didn't succeed much because it looks like many of local Russians, they just lived the way they lived, their ancestors lived before, even though another centuries were passing by. So, okay. I think that's it. Thank you very much.